Hey everybody, I am John Wood and thanks for stopping by my channel, J Wood Fly Fishing. If you like what you see here today, be sure and hit that subscribe button so you'll get notifications of new videos as they come onto the channel. Today I want to tie for you a permit fly that was designed by a man named Jerry Sherman out of Atlanta, Georgia. He fishes out of Ishkalak annually, and over the years he's developed this fly as the go-to fly for catching permit in that area. If you want to hear the full story, you can find that in the May-June 2025 issue of American Fly Fishing Magazine. The story appears on page 66 along with full tying instructions and photographs. Now this is a slightly complicated fly, and after the article came out, a few people had questions about the tying, so I decided to just go ahead and do this video. It's a little bit lengthy, so get a beverage, settle in, and let's get going. Now I'm going to start with the Umpqua XS 415 hook in size 1. It's a kind of a short shank hook, so this would be equivalent to a lot of number 2 sized saltwater hooks. And this has got a black nickel finish, so it holds up forever. And it's got an ultra sharp point on it. And as you can see, it's got a drop point. So once you hook a fish, they're pretty much there until you're ready to get them off. My thread is a 6/0 uni. I like nylon thread for attaching eyes and for attaching these fibers that we're going to use, which is CCT Fibers from Cascade Crest Tool. Now I just built a thread base there, and I'm going to set my 3/16 inch brass dumbbell eyes in silver on there and take 2 wraps across the top of that, straighten it up and take 2 that way, and just some extras, and then I'm just going to make a bunch of crisscross wraps until when I pull on those eyes they are secured side to side. Once I get that done, I'm going to make some choke wraps between the dumbbell eyes and the hook shank to tighten that up, and then make a few more crisscross wraps each way, and then one more set of choke wraps. Now, the reason I do the choke wraps is because it locks it down to the point to where those eyes won't roll around the hook shank. And if you get that on there secured and work really really close to your thread breaking point, you won't have any trouble with those eyes rolling around on you. Now I am going to lay a thread base to where my thread is going to hang just past the barb of the hook. Now I'm going to use my hairline pseudo hair in sand, and I'm going to cut off a small clump, and this does not take nearly as much as you think it might. You want to avoid overdoing it, because it'll create a lump back there at the tie-in point that will interfere with our other materials as they go on and make the butt end of that thing really more bulky than you want it. Now I've cut that clump off, and you can see it's not really large. Now I'm going to take my grooming comb brush combination. If you can't find one of these at a beauty supply, it's just a eyebrow comb brush. Check out my website. I've got them there if you want to get one of those for doing operations like this. Now I'm going to take this clump, and you can see it's really not very big right now, and I'm going to measure at about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches. Pinch it there, and then just kind of slowly work the shorter fibers out without disturbing the butt ends of them, so they're still kind of even. These long fibers and the ones I groomed out, I'm going to save them, putting them in a bucket over there, and I use them for dubbing. Now you can see how much hair I've got there. It is not a lot. I'm just going to kind of put a little moisture on it to gather it. There we go. That way we can see where our point is. And I'm going to measure so that we're about 1 hook eye length longer than the entire hook from the very back of the bend to the front of the eye. Pinch that right there, and then I'm just going to take a couple of wraps, and our thread's been hanging there, so it's flattened out real good and it behaves extremely well. And I want to make sure I'm right where I was. Kind of move back a little bit, so let's go back further. I don't want to go too far around that bend. And I'm just going to take about 4 wraps right there going forward, and then fold these butt ends over on to that clump. Put a little pressure on my bobbin, and then lock those in. I don't want a big giant base right there, but I do want a thread base. Again, I'll put a little moisture on there to get that all clumped together. Now I'm going to take my thread, and I'm just going to run up here and put one more layer going forward and one more layer going backward, a thread up to where my eye tie-in point is, and then come right back. And I'm going to stop right in front of that fold in those fibers. Now I'm going to take my cactus chenille in peachy flesh, medium size, and pinch fibers off the core about 1/8 or so of an inch. Lay that there, just catch the core, and then pull it back to where the fibers, where they start again, are lined up with the back end of that thread base. Jump back there with your thread, come up here, kind of blend that in, and it wants to float on around to the other side of the hook. I'm okay with that. Now I'm going to bring my thread right back up against that for 2 wraps, and I'm going to jump forward, and I'll show you why I'm doing that in just a second. It kind of helps us. I'm going to come around, and I want to make 2 complete wraps right on top of that little thread base that I built, and it's kind of squeezing everything in there because there's a little bit of bulk to this cactus chenille. Now when I bring that around on that second wrap, I unwrap that thread wrap, and that brings that thread right up against the core of the chenille, and that way I can lock it down without pulling it forward. Now I'm just going to make a few wraps to lock it down, go back, come up here, and then cut again about 1/8 of an inch from the tie-in, and then pulling those fibers out, I'm going to pull going forward towards the dumbbell eyes, so that when I get ready to wrap my core down, it's already pointing in the direction that I want it to be. There we go. Now I've created a little lump over here on the back side of that. I just want to run forward a little bit and then come back. Then I'm kind of trying to maintain a taper so I don't ever have a big drop off, which will interfere with our tie-in when we're tying in our materials on the top. Now I'm going to use a badger hackle, and the barb length should be between 1 and 1.5 times the length of the gap, and that I'm talking about the gap right at the point to the shank, not back here where it's fatter. So I've got that marked. I'm just going to strip these barbs off of here, trim that stem a little bit, and that's kind of what I'm looking for right there. With my thread right there, I'm going to go ahead and tie it in. There we go. Get that locked in. I'm going to hold that feather so it doesn't rotate on me, and go ahead and lock that stem. And I'm bringing that stem up on my side of the hook, and that's going to kind of even out that taper that was built with the core of the cactus chenille. Now I want my thread, we're going to do the same thing. 2 wraps right up against the hackle and then jump one forward because I want everything squished back to the back of that fly as much as possible. Get my little hackle plies here and just carefully wrap that around there. And I want to get 3 full wraps, and I'm bringing that stem around just as close as I can to the previous wrap. Alright, and again, I'm going to reverse that 1 thread wrap that jumped forward, come back, my thread's right up against the stem of that feather. And once I get a little pressure on there, get 2 wraps, remove my hackle pliers, and you're going to get some hackles that want to go a little crazy there, and I'm going to kind of pull that forward just a little bit and then clip it nice and short. I've got a couple of strays here. Without cutting your thread, knock those off. Now I'm going to open my thread up, flatten it by spinning it counterclockwise, stroke all of those barbs back, and then wrap back to where they're tied in. And that's just going to kind of give them just a slightly rearward angle so that they're a little bit out of the way for tying and they're in the right direction for how we want the fly to look. Alright, now I'm going to work on my taper again, and I do this every time, as you can see, that I come away from the material there, and then again I'm going to go 2 wraps right in front of that hackle. This time we're going to leave it. Now we're going to set the eyes, and these eyes are eyes that I built, and you can see I put a dot right on the end of that as the pupil. That's a very, very realistic representation of how these things look. I want to just measure them and tell you, if you want to learn to make these yourself, if you don't already know, check out my video Shrimp Crab Eyes on my channel. I'll put a link right there so you can see it. Now we're going to measure those for about half the length of the tail. And then I'm going to pinch that right there. Make sure they're both even. Check it again. There we go. And I want those to protrude just a little bit beyond the end of those hackle points. Now I'm going to take my little jeweler's pliers. I'm going to pinch this mono down several times. You can see there, and there's 3 reasons for that. Number 1, the very first pinch is going to mark where I want my eyes tied in. Those are uneven a little bit, so I'm going to even them back up. There we go, and repinch that so they're even. There we go. They don't have to be 100%, but they're pretty darn close. Now that's going to give me a mark where I'm tying these in. And then the other crimps are going to kind of flatten it so I don't have a big fat wide profile there. And also all these little bumps that we've created are going to hold those things in there so there's no need for any kind of adhesive. Now I just want to take 2 loose wraps on that and then just kind of position those with my thumb and fingernail, get them to lay the way I want them in there, and we're going to get them close, and then I'm going to pinch those down, cinch down on my thread, and then work my way back here, keeping that mono where I want it. And this is a nylon mono, 17 pound, and bring it back. And when they're all cinched down, because of the way everything's built, they will be kind of splayed. I'm just looking at what I got there, and they'll be pointing upward when that fly is being fished. If they're not splaying enough, just give them a little bend and they'll come right out there. Alright, now that I've got them positioned, I'm just going to go ahead and just build a bunch of wraps on top of that. Come up here to where my stubs are, clip those off just a little bit behind the dumbbell eyes, and then jump forward, get some wraps, and I want those on either side of the shank, and then I'm just going to wrap those things up. Now we're ready to put the fibers on there, but we need to get them prepped. Okay, before I get started tying, I always like to do a little prep. First, I'm going to do the CCT Fibers from Cascade Crest Tools. And if you're not familiar with these, my instructions may have been a little confusing because it calls for 2 groups of 4 bundles. And you can see this comes in a hank and it's got a whole bunch of little bundles on either side. It's about 14 inches overall. And to get 4 bundles, I just pull them loose from the hank, cut them right up next to the zip tie, and then I'm going to do a little prep on them because you can see and you can imagine that 4 loose bundles like that, when you go to start tying them on, when you crimp them like that, they're going to spread out. And that's going to be real hard to handle, getting your thread in between everything where you want it. So I'm going to use this nylon brush and wrap the bundle around my hand like that. I've got it over my index finger, pinch it with my thumb, and then come around my second finger. And that's going to keep me from pulling those individual bundles loose as I brush the binding wrap off there. And once I get that off there, sometimes they're a little more stubborn than others. Anyway, once I get that off of there, you've got one smooth bundle, and it's much easier to tie in on top of the hook shank when you're building that crab. For the other end, I turned around, start at the end, work back up toward your hand until you get to the point that you had reached on the other end. We'll do that one more time for you. 4 bundles. You're going to wrap that, pinch it, come around here, under my second finger, and then start near the end and brush using this nylon brush. If you can't find one of these at your local hardware store, I do have them on my website. It's listed as a grooming brush in the tying materials store. So start at the end, work up towards your hand, and then repeat the process on the other end of this group of bundles. And if you would like these fibers, I have them on my website also, again in the fly tying materials and tools store. Alright, now that I've got those bundles groomed out, I'm going to take my little magnetic scale that stays on my vise base, and I'm just going to measure those, and I want each one to be about 1.5 inches. So I pinch it there, reach out with my second and third finger to hold it steady, and then clip it. And I'm going to do that and get 4 of these approximately just over 1.5 inch bundles. And we're going to tie those in one at a time on the crab. And you'll see this last one is usually a little bit longer, and that's the one I like to use first when we're tying those on there. That's going to give me 2 groups of 4. for a total of 8.5-inch long bundles to tie the body on Jerry's kid permit crab. Next thing I'm going to prep is the legs, and there's going to be 2 legs on each fly, and these legs come in these straps. And this is a Wapsi silly leg, barred sand with a fire orange tip. I've got some that I've already been working on here. So 2 legs, and I want to keep them together because they're just much easier to tie in and handle. So I'm going to cut 2 of them loose at the end and leave them bound together. Again, just a lot easier to tie on. You'll see when we get there just how simple that is. And that's all there is for the prep. One thing I might want to mention, tungsten scissors. These fibers will eat up stainless steel scissors. So having tungsten scissors is going to be a great help to you. They'll last a lot longer. This pair of Dr. Slicks I've got here, I've had them I think for about 6 years, and there's no telling how many bundles of this CCT fiber I've cut through. But with a stainless steel, your scissors will be done in about 2 weeks. Alright, now that my Cascade Crest CCT fibers are prepped, let's get this thing put together. Now, just to get those hackles out of the way, I'm going to take it's kind of a heavy duty twist tie, and I'm going to slide it right to the fattest point of my tie-in, and just kind of wrap that around. And then I'm going to make sure that I've got the ends of that out of the way, and then slide it right just barely off the back of my tie-in point. You can see a tiny little gap right there. Now that's going to help us a lot getting this first bundle in, so that the fibers are not in the way and we're not getting them caught in a thread. Now this is the longest one that I got off of one of the bundles that we created, and I'm gonna set it on there at about the middle, and I've got my thread right back there, as far back as it'll go on the tie-in point. And we're going to take 2 wraps right there, going front to back over the top, and then I'm going to put pressure on the thread, and I'm going to go back to front over the fibers on my side of the hook. And I think you can see what I just did, and that creates just a slightly backward tilt to those fibers. Now for the second bunch of wraps, which are coming behind this and going in front of those, I'm going to make 3 wraps. Then I'm going to come back under, make 2 more wraps going in the direction we went first, and then back under and 1 more wrap over the bundle on my side, back to front. And then that's all you need to lock that in, because you can see we've created a crisscross right there that's really got everything secured. Now at this point, I'm going to take that twist tie off. Don't worry, all those fibers and everything is tied in really good and secured. You're not gonna bother it. Now I'm going to use this little tool. I don't really normally go for gadgetry, but this thing right here is just spectacular. It's the Schming, I think that's how you say that, material clip. Just squeeze it, it opens these up, slide it over your thread, make sure you've got it beyond the thread before you clamp it back down, and then just slide it back a little bit. Now I'm going to take the longest piece that I got off my other bundle of fibers, and we're going to do the exact same thing. Now it's a little trickier right now because that thing is in the way, but we're just going to do the same process. 2 wraps front to back, and then 3 wraps back to front on the materials on my side of the hook. Then 2 more wraps front to back, locking down this set of bundles under the hook, and 1 more wrap on our side back to front. Pull everything back, take a couple of wraps, and my thread is falling right in front of that catch point, and that's where you want. And that's going to create just some small little gaps in the fibers that you'll be able to see when we get done. And now I'm just going to repeat that process all the way to the front of the fly. And as you're doing this, try to work with right up to close to the breaking point of the thread. You want everything nice and snug. 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, wrap in front. And as you go, kind of slide those things, make sure they're nice and perpendicular on a flat plane to the hook shank. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, and wrap. We're just working our way forward. And you're going to have 8 of these little bundles, and each one ties in exactly the same. If at any point you get that bundle started and it's not sitting the way you want, just carefully unwrap it and try it again. You may end up, when you're first working with these things, scrapping a few of these little bundles. Don't worry, this is a very inexpensive material at $3.25 for that hank that you saw earlier, which is, I don't even know how many of these crabs I could tie with one of those, probably 150, but it's a lot. And you can see I'm kind of getting a few of those out of place. Don't worry about that. We are going to address those later on during the trimming. If anything's really, far-fetched out of place, you just trim it off. Not a big deal. 2 wraps. 1, 2, 3. 2 wraps. 1 wrap. Finish off. Now this last bundle, you can see we've got a pretty good gap right there. And I do want to maintain some of that gap between the fibers and the dumbbell eyes. I don't want to shove them right up underneath the eyes, because what that does is it forces those fibers back like that because of the angle on the eyes. And then that makes trimming really, really tricky. And it's tricky enough as it is, so we don't want to overcomplicate it unnecessarily. So I'll get these wrapped on here, and I'll show you that gap. This one worked out really, really good. It's exactly the way I want it. And you can see that gap there. The fibers are not shoved up underneath the eyes. They kind of splay when you tie them in. So that's why if you get right up underneath those eyes, they're going to splay, but it's going to force them all back like this. And then when you go to trimming, these are forced back. Your others are, perpendicular to the hook shank, and that just complicates everything. So I've got those all on there. Now here's where we come to a personal question. Do you want to trim this before you put the legs on, or do you want to put the legs on and then trim it? Now I've done it both ways. I prefer to just put the legs on now, which I just loop those legs around the thread. Flip that up. The legs are evened at the ends, and I'm just going to put a little back pressure on that with my legs. Get 2 or 3 wraps right there. And now we're just going to make crisscross wraps. 1, 4. And I start with 4 going each direction over that. Now you can see with the long fibers, I'm able to just pull them back out of the way, and I can just wrap those on there very easily with no problems. If you've trimmed your fly, you can see that it would be real easy to get those fibers caught in your thread wraps when you're tying these legs on there. And that's why I do it this way. Now I'm going to just take several more wraps each direction over that, going at a 45-degree angle. And then once I've got those to where they're laying in the way I want, that one is not, because I got 1 thread wrap too far back. There we go. And that kind of drifted around. There we go. Got those thread wraps off of there. Now, yeah, when I let that go, they're doing exactly what I want. I kind of want them to open up a little bit, but I don't want them going sideways. And I just caught that one. So I am just going to show you that this doesn't always work out exactly the way I want it the first time. So I'm going to show you, just unwrap it now back to the point to where they're where I want them. And that's another reason I keep a little pressure on these. I'm going to go a little bit further back up. We're going to start that all over. There we go. Now, see, it was that very first wrap that I made that pulled those over. Let's make sure we got those right on top and try that again. There we go. They need to be dead center on the eye before you start wrapping. And that's what I didn't do on that first one because, you know, just got in a hurry. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you can see that first time I showed you, they weren't completely even. Now they are. They're very much even on there. When I let that go, that's what they're going to do. And that's exactly what I want. And I'm just going to, again, put a bunch of wraps on top, both directions. Now those are not going anywhere. They're going to do exactly what we want. And now I'm going to caught that little bit of rubber that was sticking out the front under the thread wraps. Now I'm going to do 2 whip finishes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I want 6 or 7 wraps. And if you want to do a third, go right ahead. It's not going to hurt anything. But I do not like to put adhesive on permit flies, nor do I like to put adhesive, if it's at all avoidable, on bass flies, because those fish have a very, very strong olfactory senses, and they don't like stinky chemical stuff. And a lot of times I've seen bass, I've never been able to permit fish, but I've heard stories that they do the same thing. I've had bass swim up on a fly, and just very aggressively, but they get real close and then they smell it and they stop. And I don't want that to happen with these. You don't get that many shots at permit, so you don't really want to muff it because of the way you've tied your fly. Now we're going to groom this thing, and you can see my fibers are sticking straight out. I'm going to take my little brush comb, and this is a eyebrow brush comb combination. You can usually find these at beauty stores or at the beauty department in stores like Walmart. If you can't and you want one of these, you want to try it, because I use it as a dubbing brush and all kinds of things. You can find them on my website, on my fly tying materials and tools page, where you can also find these CCT fibers and the nylon brush that I use to groom the CCT fibers in that short little clip. Now I've got those all groomed out, and the one thing that I can tell you, the most important thing that I can tell you about trimming these flies is do not get in a hurry. Do not rush it. Take little bitty bites, because you're trying to get a pretty precise shape on that, and it's a bit like a heart shape, and that's what you're going for. You get in too big a hurry, you'll end up with something like this. It's all lopsided. Now, I don't know if the fish care that much, but as a fly tyer, I do. I want my fly to be what I want it to be. I don't want it to be some lopsided blob like this gold and tan version of this is. So, other than that, I'm going to show you a couple of little clips that I make to get started, and then pretty much I'm just going to tell you, try to get that heart shape. Just work slow. Another thing, don't pull on these fibers and cut them, because you can easily distort the position of those, and we're going for a straight edge here for a little bit back on that, and if you distort the position of those fibers, then you're going to end up, and that's what happened with this golden tan fly right here, is I got a little crazy. Now you can either use straight scissors or curved, and I kind of like the curved myself for most of this, but you want them to be tungsten. Your stainless steel scissors will be eaten up by these fibers and just about any other fiber like this. So always use tungsten scissors when you're cutting these kinds of fibers. Okay, I'm going to start, and I am going to go ahead and use these straight scissors, and I'm going to cut that much wider than it's going to end up being. Like I said, take small bites. Don't get in a hurry. Now you saw what that looked like. I'm going to come back and cut it the other direction because those fibers were going against me and just kind of moving. Now you can see what that looks like. Now if I keep this in the vise, those legs are not going to get in my way. Sometimes when you're handling it by hand, they will get in your way and you'll end up cutting them. Again, take a little bit of a bite, and then I'm going to come back the other way, and then I know you probably can't see it, but I can see both sides of this. I got just a little bit more than I wanted to at this point on that one. So that's one of the problems with doing it in the vise, is that you can get a little carried away. So there's that cut, and you can see it's not completely even, but it's we're still going to go beyond where that is, so we're in good shape. Now I'm going to come in here and cut this the other direction. And we're going to eventually end up rounding that off, but for now I'm just cutting it back, and what I'm going for is something just larger than a nickel here. I mean, just barely larger, not a lot. And when we get to the end, I'll show you with the nickel what we're going for. And you can see right there with that nickel right up against those eyes, we're still in the ballpark. I'm just going to go ahead and trim this thing out, and then I'll show you the final fly and what we're actually going for with the final shape. With it in the vise, like I said, it's hard for me to show you everything because I have to be able to see what's going on, and nobody wants to see my mug back behind that thing, so I can't look straight on at it. And now I'm going to get an overall shape of this fly before I do a little side tapering, which you will want to do before, because you can see that's really thick on the edges. You don't really want that. You're going to want to trim that down a little bit so that you've got a narrower edge on there. But I always want to do my overall shape first, and then the tapering on the edge is the final shaping, and it lets me fine tune the final look of this fly. But that is the part where you can, as you're cutting, you can nip your legs off, so you want to be really careful. If you want, you could put that material clip back on there and hold those things out of the way. but I find that just kind of gets in the way when I'm cutting around the backside of the fly. Now you can see right here I nipped it a little short, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. Like I said, the shape of the fly is probably more important to me than it is to the fish. I just like for it to look the way I want it to look when I'm fishing, because I'm going to have a little more confidence in it. But because I nipped that one side a little short, I am going to nip this one, and I actually got that a little too short. So it's like giving yourself a haircut. You nip one side a little short, and then you nip the other side a little shorter. Let me get that out of the vise. I'll finish trimming this up, see if we can save it. But I think we can. With it in my hand, I've got a lot more control because I can rest those scissors against my fingers for getting those cuts just right. Like I said, we're going for something just a hair larger than a nickel for the size 1. If you're going to do the size 2, we want to go about the size of a penny, or maybe just a hair bigger. And in some cases, there's some areas where you may even want your crab to be the size of a dime, and that would be a case for fish like sheep's head along the coast. Those things love crabs, but they like the tiniest crabs. If you want to do this thing in a black or brown and tan, those sheep's head just love this thing. So because it was designed for a permit, that's not the only thing you can catch on it. Don't be afraid. If you want to tie some of these to cast it for other fish, any saltwater fish that eats crab will eat this thing. It's kind of a universal thing. Where it's important for permit is they are just very, very picky and really hard to catch on the fly. If you've never read the story The Longest Silence by Thomas McGuane, or McEwen, however it's supposed to be said, check that out, and it will give you a better explanation in long form about the long silences between takes when fishing for permit. Alright, so I think you've seen enough of my little fingers doing this stuff. And I'm just going to give you what I've come up with here on this crab. Let you see it. I'll put it back in the vise. And it's not perfect, but it's pretty darn close. I'm just going to flop those legs over to where one pair is on one side, one's on the other side. There we go. I'll let you see what that looks like. Now I'm going to come in here, grab the ends of those, and I'm not stretching. I pinch them together and grab them. Now I want it, there's the end of our tail, and I want it a little bit past, but you can always trim that down when you're on the water. So I'm going to trim these a little bit longer than I may end up fishing them. Just a hair. And if you find you want them shorter when you're on the water, you can do that. And there you have it. That is Jerry's Kid tied with CCT fibers for the body. And that is a killer permit fly. Like I said, you can tie it for other species. I've got some here tied with striping, and that's just brown and tan, but you can tie those with any color fibers you want to match the crabs in your area. Another good one is a combination of olive, tan, rust, and brown. And that's a really mottled color that matches a young crab that's just molted. Anyway, there you have it. That's Jerry's Kid. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, subscribe to my channel to see others as they are posted. And until next time, peace, love, and fly fishing, my friends.